You don't belong in this house anymore, Dad. It's time you gave it up to people who actually know how to use it. That was my son, Jacob, my only boy. The words came out of his mouth on a humid August evening in Dayton, Ohio, inside the medieval very living room I built with 40 years of sweat and mortgage payments. He sat there with his wife, Ashley, legs crossed like a queen on my recliner, her manicured hands resting on the armrest. I still remember hauling in from Sears back in '92. I froze. Not because I didn't hear him, but because part of me couldn't believe I had. This was my home. My brick, 3-bedroom, split level on Riverside Drive. The house I bought in 1981 with a 15% interest mortgage when Reagan was still in office. The same house where Jacob took his first steps on the creaky hardwood floor. Where my late wife, Carol, painted the walls robin's egg blue because she said it made her feel like spring could last forever. And now, my own flesh and blood was telling me I was too old for it. I asked him, my voice quieter than I intended. "Excuse me, son." Ashley leaned forward before Jacob could answer. "What Jacob means, Mr. Harris, is that this house would be better off in younger hands. We've got kids to raise, a future to build. Well, you'd be safer in a nice retirement community." Her words dripped like honey laced with poison. I should have argued. I should have yelled. But all I could do was stare at Jacob. He didn't meet my eyes. He just nodded along with her like a man under oath. Inside, something broke. Now, before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. I've worked every single day of my life. Started as a machinist at the GM plant. Did 32 years there before they shipped the jobs overseas. I kept us afloat, fixing tractors, doing odd jobs, even, scrubbing floors at the local diner when times got rough. I never once let my family go hungry. When Carol got sick, I drained my savings to cover the bills Medicare wouldn't touch. Jacob was in college back then. I skipped meals so his tuition checks wouldn't bounce. I thought he'd remember that sacrifice. I thought he'd carry it with pride. But as I stood in that living room, the smell of old pine cleaner in the air, I realized he remembered none of it. Instead, he saw me as a burden. "You've had your time, Dad," Jacob finally said, his voice flat. "Now it's our turn. You can either sign over the house peacefully, or we'll have to talk to a lawyer about guardianship." Guardianship. The word made my stomach turn. My own son was threatening to have me declared incompetent, like I was some senile fool who couldn't manage his own affairs. I didn't argue that night. I didn't raise my voice. I just told them I'd think about it. Ashley smiled, all teeth, as if she'd already won. Jacob clapped me on the shoulder like he was doing me a favor. But as they left, I stood by the window and watched their car pull away. The street lamps flickered on, casting long shadows across my lawn. That lawn I'd mowed every Saturday since 1981. And I knew something deep in my bones. They weren't going to take my home, not without a fight. And if Jacob thought he could bully me into surrendering everything I'd built, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The very next week, Jacob and Ashley came back, this time with smiles too wide to be genuine, and a folder tucked under Jacob's arm. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, the morning sunlight spilling through the blinds, when they strolled in like they owned the place. Ashley set a bakery box of muffins on the counter, her lipstick-red smile already rehearsed. "Dad," Jacob said, pulling out the chair across from me, "we've been thinking a lot about your future. We just want what's best for you. Ashley chimed in before I could reply. We even toured Maplewood Retirement Village yesterday. It's so nice, Mr. Harris. Indoor pool, movie nights, staff that checks in every hour. You'd be safe there. Safe. That word again, like I was some fragile piece of glass ready to shatter. Jacob slid the folder across the table. Inside were papers, property transfer forms with my name already typed at the top. All you'd need to do is sign, he said, tapping the spot with a cheap ballpoint pen. We'll handle the rest. We'll even cover the moving truck. I looked at him, then at Ashley. Their faces told me everything. This wasn't about my safety. This was about my house, my land, the equity I'd built brick by brick. I pushed the folder back across the table. No. Jacob's jaw tightened. Dad, don't be stubborn. You can't keep this up forever. The roof needs fixing. The stairs are a hazard. I built those stairs with my own hands, I cut in, my voice low but firm. And they've carried me just fine. Ashley leaned forward, her perfume sharp in the air. You're being unreasonable. Jacob's trying to help you. If you won't think about yourself, at least think about us. Your grandchildren need stability. That was the dagger, using the kids against me. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the linoleum. This conversation's over. Jacob slammed his palm on the table, the sound echoing off the cabinets. You don't get it, do you? You don't have a choice. If you won't sign, then we'll file for guardianship. Ashley already spoke, to a lawyer in town. They said it wouldn't be hard. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't let it show. Get out, Ashley scoffed, gathering her purse. This is exactly why we need to do this, Jacob. He's irrational. They left in a storm of slammed doors and muttered curses. I stood there, staring at the stack of untouched muffins on the counter, the smell of blueberries filling the room like mockery. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls of my home, each photo frame and scuff mark whispering memories of Carol, of Jacob as a boy, of birthdays and Christmas mornings. They wanted to erase all of that, turn it into theirs. But something inside me shifted. If Jacob thought I was weak, if Ashley thought I was too old to fight, then maybe it was time to remind them who built this family in the first place. I pulled out the fireproof box from under my bed, the one with the deed, Carol's wedding ring, and a stack of bank records. As I thumbed through the papers, a plan began to form. A quiet, steady plan. Because if my son wanted to play legal games, he was about to find out I knew a few moves of my own. And I wouldn't just protect my house. I'd make sure they never forgot the lesson. By the next morning, I had made my decision. Calmly, deliberately, I set about reclaiming the power they thought they'd taken from me. I started with the deed. My attorney, Mr. Green, a grizzled man who'd been handling my affairs since Carol passed, looked up from his cluttered desk as I laid the papers down. Mr. Harris, are you sure about this? He asked, adjusting his glasses. I want to make some changes, I said evenly, and I want them done quietly. Green nodded slowly, understanding immediately. I wasn't angry, I was patient, calculated. You realize they've already spoken to a local lawyer, he said. They might try to contest this. I know, I replied. Let them try. We drew up a new plan. I would transfer the deed into a trust under my control, with specific clauses that protected the house from anyone who tried to claim it without my permission. It took hours, emails, phone calls, notarized signatures, but by evening the deed was officially changed. The house was mine. legally untouchable. Next, I visited the local bank, Riverside Savings and Trust. Sitting in Mr. Patel's office, I quietly adjusted the accounts, setting up alerts for any unusual activity. If Jacob or Ashley tried to dip into my funds to help me move, they'd trigger alarms. As I drove home, a sense of calm settled over me. For the first time since that hot August evening, I felt in control. But I didn't stop there. Small towns have long memories. Dayton is no exception. I reached out to a few neighbors I trusted, Martha Jenkins next door, Tom from the hardware store, and quietly reminded them of my decades-long presence, my contributions, the community events I'd funded. Word would get around. People notice. When someone tries to bully an elder out of their home, evenings were spent planning the next step, confronting them in a setting where I would hold all the cards. It wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be precise, public, undeniable. The breaking point came when I received a text from Ashley. Jacob says if you don't sign over the house soon, he'll involve the court. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I smiled, a slow, steady smile. They thought threats could scare me. I typed back one line. We'll see who has the last word. That night, I walked through the house, touching the walls, the stairs, even the old kitchen tiles I had replaced myself. Memories of Carol, Jacob as a boy running through the rooms, birthdays, Christmas mornings, all of it strengthened my resolve. They wanted to take my dignity, my home, my peace. I would give them none of it. And when the time came, they would leave, humiliated. It was Saturday morning when I invited Jacob and Ashley over under the guise of family brunch. I cooked my famous scrambled eggs and crispy bacon, the same breakfast I'd made for them countless times. Everything looked normal. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows. Jacob arrived first, looking smug as ever. Ashley followed, rolling her eyes at my old-fashioned table setting. I poured coffee for everyone, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. "Thanks for inviting us, Dad," Jacob said, sitting at the head of the table, the same chair he had once refused to acknowledge as mine. "We thought we'd check in, make sure you're settling into the idea." I smiled faintly. "Of course, son. Please, sit. Eat." As they dug in, I casually mentioned, "You know, I finalized some paperwork yesterday. Just some housekeeping. With the house and the trust." Jacob frowned. "Paperwork?" "Yes," I said, passing the butter. "The kind that ensures the house stays in the family. Legally protected. Even if someone tries to force me out." Ashley froze mid-bite. Jacob's fork clattered onto his plate. You what?" he demanded. "I transferred the deed into a trust under my control," I said, calm as the morning sun. "It means, legally, the house cannot be transferred without my permission, and I added a clause that any attempt to challenge it in court would require the challenger to pay all legal fees up front." The color drained from their faces. You can't do that," Ashley stammered, her voice cracking. "Oh, I already did," I said, placing my coffee mug down with deliberate emphasis. "And just for clarity, any attempt to file for guardianship will be viewed as harassment. I've already spoken to Mr. Green and the local judge, so that's not an empty threat." Jacob's shoulders slumped. His smugness had evaporated into panic. "Dad, this isn't fair." I leaned forward, voice soft but icy. "Life isn't fair, son. But you learned early on that I built this house, this family, and this life with my own hands, and no amount of manipulation or threats is going to take that away." Ashley's lips trembled. You can't do this." "I already have," I replied. And if you ever try to challenge it, well, let's just say the neighbors and the town know exactly who's trying to bully who. Word travels fast in Dayton. Jacob's phone buzzed. A bank alert. My checking account had flagged suspicious login attempts. He looked at me, wide-eyed. I just smiled. Breakfast is over, I said. You can leave. They didn't argue. They didn't protest. They left in silence, shoulders slumped, their power gone. For the first time in weeks, I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping my coffee. The house smelled of bacon, old wood, and victory. The sunlight danced on the hardwood floors, and I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. They thought they could take it all. They thought they could break me. But they underestimated the quiet strength of a man who built his life brick by brick, day by day, for decades. Weeks passed, and word of the Harris House showdown spread through Dayton like wildfire. Neighbors whispered at the corner diner. The hardware store clerk gave me a knowing nod every time I walked in, and even the local police chief smiled when I mentioned minor paperwork inquiries. They all knew what had happened. Jacob and Ashley, meanwhile, found themselves isolated. Their friends began avoiding them after hearing their attempts to bully an elderly man out of his home. The bank had frozen any unauthorized transactions they tried, and their lawyer privately advised them against taking further action. Every avenue they had hoped would secure the house or control me had slammed shut. I sat in my living room one evening, the same room where Jacob had delivered the words that shattered me, and I let myself breathe. The floorboards creaked under, my weight carrying echoes of the past. Carol's laughter, Jacob as a boy running through the halls, holidays spent decorating and cooking. These weren't just memories. They were proof. Proof of a life built with love, sweat, and sacrifice. The house was mine. The trust ensured no one could touch it. My dignity, once threatened, had been fully restored. And most importantly, my peace of mind had returned. I thought about poetic justice, the way life sometimes balances itself when people overstep. Jacob and Ashley had been ambitious, greedy, and arrogant, but their actions had revealed them to the world. They had tried to steal, and instead they lost respect, credibility, and even their social standing in Dayton. I poured a glass of whiskey, a quiet smile forming on my lips. Some lessons, I murmured to myself, are learned the hard way. The house was quiet now. My mornings filled with coffee and the chirping of birds, my evenings with old records Carol loved spinning on the turntable. I walked the hallways, not with fear, but with gratitude. Each step reminded me that I had survived, that I had fought wisely, and that my life's work, the home, the memories, the legacy, remained untouched. And so I rested. Jacob and Ashley would move on, find other battles to fight. But the Harris home, the heart of everything I'd built, stayed with me. Their loss became my peace. Their scheming a reminder of how strength often lies in patience, planning, and quiet perseverance. I poured another glass and raised it to the empty room. To the memories, I said softly, and to the life they tried to take, but never will. As the sun set over Riverside Drive, the warm light spilling through my living room windows, I felt something I hadn't in years. A calm, unwavering sense of victory. Life had been cruel at times, yes, but justice, however delayed, had finally been served. And in that stillness, I knew one truth. Dignity, once reclaimed, is the most unassailable form of revenge. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, justice, and life lessons learned the hard way.